The Young and the Restless spoilers shock. Lily had always believed she understood the shape of heartbreak, the rhythm of disappointment, the quiet weight of betrayal settling into her chest like an old companion. Yet nothing truly prepared her for the moment she realized Kane had not simply drifted away but had chosen someone else, chosen Phyllis, with her red hair, sharp energy, intoxicating recklessness, and the chaotic fire that always lured men toward the edge of ruin. The knowledge burned through Lily not with the heat of anger, but with the cold, collapsing heaviness of someone who suddenly felt transparent, forgettable, replaceable in the very life she spent years stitching together. So while Kane and Phyllis were locked in the kind of night that obliterates consequences, Lily found herself walking aimlessly through the city lights, refusing to cry, refusing to break, refusing to be the kind of woman who begged for an explanation that would never soothe her. She stepped into the bar like a ghost drifting into a place meant for the living, letting the dim golden light and low hum of conversation blur the edges of her own reality. She did not want to think. Thinking only led her back to Kane, back to the image of betrayal she tried to outrun. She ordered her first drink quickly, her second without hesitation, and by the time the glass was emptied again she felt her pulse finally losing the tight, suffocating rhythm of panic. She wanted to float, even if only for a night. Holden noticed her before she saw him. He recognized a kind of sorrow he himself had been carrying for months. That quiet, disoriented ache of someone who had lost not just a relationship but the sense of who they were inside it. He had been drifting too, struggling under the weight of expectations that suffocated him, fighting battles he couldn't name, waking up every morning feeling like a failure in a life he once believed he could manage. And something about Lily, the way she held her glass too tightly, the way her smile stayed fixed while her eyes flickered like a dying flame, pulled him toward her before he could stop himself. Their first exchange wasn't flirtatious, it was honest in a way strangers can sometimes be before the world crashes back into place. They spoke of exhaustion, of disappointment, of the cruel ways life sometimes rearranged itself without asking permission. Lily didn't tell him about Kane, not directly, but the shadows in her voice revealed enough. Holden didn't tell her about the loneliness eating at him every night, but the heaviness resting on his shoulders spoke for him. They understood each other instantly, like two people thrown into the same storm, clinging to driftwood because drowning alone felt unbearable. One drink became two. Two became a shared confession. And those confessions softened into the kind of quiet vulnerability that only emerges between two people who never expected to cross paths, yet suddenly find solace in one another. Lily felt strangely safe with Holden, not judged, not pitted, not measured against who she used to be or who she failed to become. She felt seen. Not as Kane's wife. Not as the woman who always tried to hold her world together. Just Lily, raw and bruised, caught in a moment where her heart simply wanted to stop hurting. Holden, for his part, felt something rediscover itself within him, something fragile and desperately human, the desire to be close to someone who understood pain without requiring explanation. It wasn't passion that pushed them closer, it was survival, the instinct to reach for warmth when the cold had become unbearable. When the bar closed, neither of them wanted the night to end. Holden asked Lily where she would go, and when she looked away, unable to answer, he understood that she didn't want to return to an empty home filled with too many memories. He offered his place not out of desire but out of concern, sensing she was unraveling in quiet ways. She hesitated only because she had always been the responsible one, the stable one, the one who never crossed lines just because she was hurting. But tonight she was too exhausted to uphold her own standards, too wounded to carry the weight of morality alone. And maybe, she told herself, she deserved a night where she stopped being the woman who forgave, the woman who fought, the woman who endured. Maybe she deserved to be human. Holden's room was quiet, dim, and unexpectedly warm. He didn't touch her at first, he simply sat beside her on the edge of the bed. They talked again, softer this time, as though every word needed careful placement. Lily spoke about the pressure of being perfect, about the sharp humiliation of discovering Kane had given someone else the intimacy he once gave her. Holden admitted he felt directionless, like he had lost pieces of himself along the way and didn't know how to retrieve them. They were two strangers, yet also mirrors reflecting each other's deepest wounds. And being understood, truly understood, was intoxicating in a way Lily hadn't felt in years. The moment his lips brushed her forehead, something in her chest lifted. It wasn't a kiss of seduction, it was a kiss of recognition, of empathy, the kind of gesture that said, "I see your pain, and I'm not afraid of it." Lily didn't pull away. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt her breathing steady, felt her heartbeat slow into something almost peaceful. Holden's hand rested gently against her cheek as if asking permission without words. She leaned into him because she wanted to feel something other than emptiness, because they were both lost, both hurting, both craving the same momentary escape from the lives that had betrayed them. When his lips finally hovered above hers, their breaths mingling, their bodies leaning closer with the unspoken understanding of what might come next, Lily felt the world narrowing to just that single fragile moment. They weren't doing anything wrong, she told herself. They were both broken, both abandoned by the people who should have stayed. They weren't cheating, they were surviving. They weren't betraying. They were healing each other in the only way that seemed possible at the edge of their emotional exhaustion. The heat that built between them wasn't lust but release, a desperate attempt to feel alive again. But just as their bodies moved closer, just as their pain began merging into something that might have rewritten the night, the apartment door opened. A familiar figure stood frozen in the doorway, breath uneven, eyes dark with shock and something far more dangerous, Kane. He had come looking for Lily, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of fear, perhaps because the fire he had ignited with Phyllis wasn't enough to silence the part of him that still wanted control over the life he'd already shattered. But whatever his reason, the sight before him snapped something inside him, the woman who loved him sitting on another man's bed, a man leaning toward her, offering the intimacy he had taken for granted for years. What Kane felt in that second wasn't righteous anger but the horrifying realization that Lily had slipped out of his orbit. The betrayal he had dealt her was coming back in a form he hadn't imagined possible. And Lily, caught between heartbreak and the fragile comfort Holden had offered, felt a rush of guilt, defiance, and raw vulnerability all at once. She hadn't planned this. She hadn't wanted to hurt Kane. But she also hadn't been given the chance to protect herself from the pain he caused. Holden froze, instinctively recognizing that he had just stepped into a war he never intended to fight. And Lily, trembling, realized the truth of the night. She wasn't trying to replace Kane, she was trying to find herself again. The moment shattered with Kane's arrival, but the emotional truth of what happened remained unmovable. She had been hurt. She had been abandoned. And she had sought solace where her heart felt momentarily safe. Whether Kane accepted that or not, the night had exposed everything. The betrayal. The loneliness. The longing. The consequences. And the undeniable fact that once hurt becomes unbearable, even the gentlest touch from a stranger can feel like salvation. Here is your continuation, long, intense, and dramatic. The moment Kane learned that Holden had taken Lily upstairs, something violent and primal ignited inside him, a burning mixture of jealousy, guilt, and the sickening recognition that this was the consequence of his own choices. The image of Lily, his Lily, walking into another man's room tore through him with a force he had not anticipated. Rage clouded his vision, but beneath it throbbed a deeper terror. The fear that he had finally pushed her too far, that the woman who had forgiven him so many times before had finally reached the edge of what her heart could survive. Driven by an impulse he could no longer control, Kane stormed through the hallway, his mind a blur of fragmented memories, every lie, every moment of weakness, every time he had taken Lily's love for granted while convincing himself she would always be there waiting. He arrived at Holden's door trembling with fury and desperation. Without hesitation, Kane slammed his foot against the door, the wood cracking under the force of his rage as it burst open. And then everything inside him collapsed into a single, paralyzing moment. Lily and Holden, tangled in intimacy, their clothes scattered across the floor, the warmth of their bodies still pressed together. Lily turned first, her expression not of guilt but of devastation. Devastation that came from too many nights of feeling unwanted, too many days of pretending she was not breaking inside. Holden froze, half sitting, half reaching for a blanket, stunned as Kane's silhouette filled the doorway like an omen of destruction. But it was Lily's voice, raw and trembling, that shattered the room. "Don't say a word. You don't get to judge me. You're the traitor here. You don't deserve to be near me." Her words sliced through Kane more brutally than the scene itself. He staggered forward, his anger cracking open into anguish, because he knew, God, he knew she was right. Kane sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face as if something inside him had finally broken beyond repair. He remembered Phyllis's touch, the excitement he mistook for clarity, the night he thought he could escape the weight of his own failures. But standing here now, seeing Lily with another man, he finally understood the cost of his betrayal. He begged, voice shaking, breath choking. To be forgiven, to be given one more chance, to be allowed to rebuild what he had destroyed. The intensity of his regret poured through every word, but Lily didn't soften. For once, she wasn't the woman who carried his burdens. She wasn't the loyal wife patching up the cracks he left behind. She was the one bleeding this time, and she refused to let him hide from that truth. Then Claire appeared in the doorway, her presence sharp and unexpected, her gaze burning with contempt. Not for Lily, but for Holden. She didn't hide her disgust. She looked at Holden as if he were exploiting a woman who was vulnerable, hurting, spiraling. But Claire didn't fully understand the depth of what Lily had endured, nor did she see that Holden had not seduced Lily but had simply been present at the exact moment she finally shattered. Claire judged him anyway, because someone had to be the villain in her eyes, and she refused to place the blame where it belonged, on Kane. Her disgust was a shield, a way to protect the narrative she believed should remain unbroken, Kane and Lily as the couple destined to survive anything. But Claire had no idea how deeply Lily had been wounded or how close she was to losing herself entirely. The air thickened with tension so heavy it vibrated in the silence between them. Holden, still processing the eruption of chaos he had unintentionally stepped into, looked from Lily to Kane with a conflicted expression. Part concern, part responsibility, part recognition that he might now be entangled in something far more complicated than a lonely night and a wounded heart. He hadn't come to steal Lily. He hadn't planned any of this. But he also couldn't deny the connection that had sparked between them, a connection built not on desire but on shared grief. And as he looked at her now, her eyes filled with pain but also courage, he felt something he wasn't prepared to feel, the possibility of caring for her. The question of whether Lily and Holden could become a real couple lingered heavily in the room like smoke refusing to clear. They were two people broken in compatible ways, drawn to each other not by lust but by the unbearable weight of their emotional scars. There was a softness between them, fragile but undeniable, something Kane sensed instantly and feared more than anything else. Lily wasn't using Holden to retaliate. She wasn't performing a spectacle of revenge. She had sought comfort from someone who, unlike Kane, hadn't betrayed her trust. And that terrified Kane, because it meant she might actually be capable of walking away, not out of rage but out of self-preservation. Could Holden and Lily truly become a couple? The truth hung unspoken, pulsing with possibility and danger. Lily wasn't ready to decide, not tonight. She was too raw, too wounded, too overwhelmed to imagine forming something new while her heart was still fractured. But the seeds had been planted, in a place Kane never imagined someone else could reach. Holden had been kind when she needed kindness, gentle when she needed softness, patient when she needed silence. And those things, in moments like this, could bloom into something powerful, something real. Kane's tears did nothing to erase the truth of what Lily had endured. Her refusal was the first moment she truly chose herself over the man who had broken her. Whether she chose Holden later didn't matter yet. What mattered was that for the first time, Kane saw the terrifying reality: he might lose her, not because she stopped loving him, but because she finally started loving herself enough to walk towards someone who treated her with the gentleness she deserved. And Holden, watching her with quiet understanding, didn't push or claim or promise anything. He simply remained present, steady, and real, the exact opposite of Kane's chaos. If Lily chose healing, Holden could become part of that path. If she needed space, he would give it. But the connection between them, born from pain but shaped by empathy, would not disappear just because Kane walked through the door crying. So yes, Holden and Lily could become a couple. Not out of revenge. Not out of impulse. But because sometimes the person who catches you at your lowest becomes the only one who understands how to help you rise again.